All right, welcome to the latest episode of Blood Money. You know, we've been gone for a while because we are actually working on some really cool long form documentaries that I'm very excited to present to you, something that Mindy and I have been working on. Today, we have an amazing guest. Scott, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Well, thanks, Phil. I am really a nobody. I'm just a DAD, a dad, but I'm a dad on fire because my daughter was murdered in a hospital on October 13th of 2021. Grace was 19 years old. She has Down syndrome. And what's happened, Velm, is I've become a full-time advocate, researcher. And then on top of that, we, through God's grace, have been able to file a wrongful death lawsuit in Grace's case, which gives me another platform to speak out on as to what's going on in the medical industrial complex. So that's what I do full time now. I'm Grace's dad, but I'm a full time fighter in the medical freedom movement.
Yeah, we are. You know, one of my favorite episodes of Blood Money, I believe I'm looking at it over here on my other screen. It's Blood Money episode 183 about essentially exposing mass murder in hospitals. I mean, we saw this during COVID. What I learned from the episode we did with Scott, as well as subsequent episodes, is that there's really the medical industry, I don't think looks at putting somebody to death as murder necessarily, because they certainly a lot of the time have protocols and behavior that leads to that. So people that are interested in watching that episode, Blood Money episode 183, fantastic episode. You know, Scott, before we go to our next topic, could you just, quickly just sum up where everything is currently in terms of the legal battle for the wrongful death of your daughter, and any other updates since we did that episode a little while back?
So the legal battle has been quite interesting. I mean, those of you who think you get justice in the Antichrist legal system, I mean, that is not where justice is found. I mean, so you just process it. In the best case scenario, we win. Medical malpractice has a $750,000 cap in Wisconsin. The doctors have no skin in the game other than showing up for a deposition in the trial, because by state statute, they have to have medical malpractice insurance. So all of their attorney bills are paid by them. We're paying all of ours out of pocket. You know, so you can see this whole system, it doesn't make any sense. And you would think at a minimum, when a doctor puts a do not resuscitate order on your daughter and euthanizes her with Precedex, lorazepam, and morphine, you'd think at least he would lose his license. But this system is designed to protect the medical industrial establishment. I'm convinced of that because God prophesied it in Revelation 18:23 when he said, your merchants of the world are the most important people, and by their pharmakia, they will deceive the nations. And, you know, so that's what's happening now. I see it as all prophesied. I see Satan's hand in using these systems to accomplish the goal. So the lawsuit then we filed on April 11th of 23. We had motions to dismiss on July 14th and October 30th. You know, praise God, the judge didn't acknowledge or he dismissed all the motions to dismiss. But then what happened, we started depositions, Vam, in May of 24. I had attorneys on the ground from Ohio. We already had my daughter Jessica's deposition done, my wife Cindy's deposition done. And when it got time to, right before my deposition, they said, we're not going to proceed with the doctor and nurse's depositions next week unless Scott signs a gag order. So that was quite a detour. It was about $20,000 in legal fees, blah, 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 a lot of wasted time. Anyway, we had the judge.
I gotta pause you real. I mean, that's a new technique that they seem to be using a lot. When that is a blatant violation of your freedom of speech, they're basically trying to shut you down in case, because they don't want the process to leave the courtroom. They don't want people to be emotionally affected by the horrors that you're subject to. Would you say that's a correct or incorrect statement?
I think that's 100% true. I mean, this is a violation of my First Amendment rights. You know, the judge somewhat rode the fence on it. He allows me now. So July 29th, we had the hearing. I can release the transcript and the audio, but I can't release the video. So they said, well, we're afraid that if the video gets out on the internet, you know, they're afraid for their life. It's like, man, you should have thought about that before you killed my daughter. I mean, I'm not out there with a vengeance. I just want people to know the truth. I'm actually working for them too, Velm. I don't even want their kids to lose their life the way Grace did. But, you know, they're so into this, they want their paycheck more than the truth and the programming and everything else. It's sick. I want to show you quickly what we put up 2 weeks ago, right after the gag order was released. You'll like this. It's not funny, but it is funny at the same time. I think I'll put it right on your screen. There we go. We have our newest billboard campaign, Will You Survive a Hospital Stay? And that URL, medicalburner.net, dovetails to my 7th series, Medical Murder is the #1 cause of death in the United States by design. I had about 1,500 search into that series, and I proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that medical murder is the #1 cause of death, and it is by design. And I have research that's what we're going to cover today. So you can, I don't know how to take that off the screen. You probably do.
Yeah, here we go. Yep.
All right. Thank you.
No worries. So take us, from there, but actually before we get started on this topic, I got to talk about a little bit of an experience that I had. And again, I'm going to reference a Blood Money episode here. Blood Money episode 247. It's about Mike Little. And the title of that episode is the Deep State Poison Mike Little, right? Now, for anybody following that story, I won't talk about it too much, but the long and short is that Mike Little has been in the hospital for the last 5 weeks. And Mike Little is an individual that is essentially suing the federal government for a lot of fraud, or was in the process of doing so. And then mysteriously he fell deathly ill, really. And for the last 5 weeks he's been in hospital. They still don't know what's wrong with him after doing 5 weeks of tests. But, the kind of hallmark moment of this came just about 3 days ago when I decided to visit Mike Little, right? And I am about to walk into Mike Little's room. I see this gentleman with all the IV needles sticking out of his arm. They're no longer in his arm. He is in a fetal position, freezing, and they had given him, I guess, a lot of morphine because he was in a considerable amount of pain. And then I look at his chart. I had a friend there, actually. He noticed the chart first. And he noticed that they hadn't even visited him in 14 hours. This man was in a fetal position, in pain, and frankly wasn't wearing anything either. So whatever was going on with the morphine and all that stuff definitely had a profound effect on him. But he was left alone for 14 hours. And then we marched into this hospital, me and this other gentleman. About half an hour later, 2 more friends show up. So now we're 4 men deep, and all of a sudden, all the nursing staff and doctors are circling around him. And had we left him alone, they weren't even checking up on him. So this is my latest experience at the hospital. And again, 5 weeks, they just still don't have his diagnosis of what's wrong with him. It just seems as though the indications are all over the place that there is something very wrong with our current hospital system.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that, Phil. I wasn't prepared for this right now, but it's what you just said is a mouthful, and it is still happening today. This hospital systems are being used to kill people. Cindy and I, my wife's name is Cindy. This past week, Wednesday, we learned of a disabled lady that came to the same hospital Grace was murdered at, St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Appleton, Wisconsin. We were asked by the family, can you visit her? Because we live only 20 minutes away from the hospital. So we did. She had just gotten out of surgery, so we didn't even have her room number. So we get to the hospital, call the front desk to find out what's the room number of the receptionist, the protocol that they have. We got there about 6:55 in the evening. They give us her room number. She, the room, we didn't realize it at the time because there's multiple wings to the hospital, but it ended up being on the same wing in the same floor as the room where Grace lost her life at. So, that's kind of eerie just in and of itself. So we walked down the hallway into this lady's room. We start talking with her. She was surprisingly doing very well for just getting out of surgery. 10 minutes after we were there, 2 armed guards showed up and said, "You're not allowed in this hospital," and escorted us out.
Oh, wow. Wow. What was that all about?
Well, it's about the reality that we're suing that hospital as part of our lawsuit.
Is that even like bullying you because of a lawsuit, though? Isn't that there just seems something? You're just visiting somebody, right? You weren't like you're running around with knives. You're not harassing people. You're not. You're not doing nothing, right? But like just because you're suing them now, you're no longer allowed in the hospital.
Well, that's, it's interesting. That's really what people don't realize this, Vim. I mean, you're a student of our history. So all of us used to believe in the rule of law. So even though we would approach things in a different way, we still knew, hey, we all are playing by the same playbook and we're not going to go outside the playbook. We're just, approaching life differently. Well, now the rule of law is dead in the medical industrial complex and in a lot of other ones, but I've studied the medical industrial complex. So you have hospitals unilaterally taking away the parents' rights to children when they turn age 12, so the child can make their own decision relative to their medical care. Now we have a restraining order put on to us by the hospital without a legal restraining order. I mean,
Wow.
this is, they don't care. Is it illegal? Yes. I mean, I ran it by our legal team because I'm writing a Substack on it. In fact, it's done. We're waiting to release it until the lady's out of the hospital, just so we don't jeopardize anything. But the attorney said, yeah, I mean, they just gave a restraining order without a restraining order. So of course that's illegal. But what are you going to do? This is the way. That's why the old way that we all said, hey, we're going to follow the rule of law. So even though I don't like this guy in the hospital, the reality is he's not doing anything wrong. So you can't just remove him, right? But that's not the way it is anymore.
It's crazy. It's really crazy. I mean, there is no rule of law, like you say, and just doing this Blood Money podcast. And we got so much more coming, by the way. I mean, we've done something like 240 episodes. Half of them are about these types of stories where people are just not following the law. It would seem as though our system was based on an honor system when it was gentlemen running the society. But now that you have all these different influences, I mean, what does it mean? Like progressivism basically means allowing corruption. I mean, I don't understand how we got to this point where we're supposed to be making for a better world, but it seems as though in the last 60 something years, our rule of law has pretty much gone out the door.
Well, I think that's accurate, but I believe it's an understatement because when I look at it in the eyes of the law of entropy, so the law of entropy says we're going from order to chaos, and we're really going from freedom to control. So the law of entropy, I don't think, was in existence until the garden in Genesis 3. And then Satan knows he's got this law on his side. So he can introduce things, and it ends up, if you don't protect your turf, the law of entropy takes over and he dresses it up. So, for example, the law of entropy relative to the medical industrial complex, and you'll see this in my slideshow, Hippocrates introduced it. And so then when you think, well, how did that happen? Well, I'm going to show you here in a minute. But when you look at the idea of trusting the science, so we went from freedom, our bodies were fearfully and wonderfully made by God, and we have the freedom to take care of our body and the responsibility to take care of our body. Well, through a series of starting with the Hippocratic Oath and multiple laws and psyops, and ultimately we've come to trust the science, which has been, a huge psyop that was unveiled during COVID. But we have the perception of order. Remember, the law of entropy is order, from order to chaos, but we get the perception that it's orderly. That's the real salesman piece of Satan. While he's stealing our rights, he gives us the perception that it's orderly. So we have these nice, clean hospitals. We have these white coats. We have all those things that give the illusion of order, but it's really chaos and it's really control.
Wow. Wow. Scott, I got to bring this up, man. Like, so we're, as we're doing a lot more digging through our legal system, I mean, it pretty much seems as though the whole thing's rigged. Like when you say 750,000 for a wrongful death, where I believe you have enough evidence that was flat out murder. I mean, there seems to be a play with words there. There seems to be limitations. I mean, you should be able to, when they kill your daughter, you should be able to sue that hospital to pretty much shut down that hospital, more or less, or at least put enough of a dent where they seriously reconsider doing that. But what I'm almost seeing is like, there was a scene in Fight Club, I remember, where the insurance adjuster guy, I think Ed Norton was the character, was saying that airplanes won't fix defective parts unless the amount of fixing is less than what they would pay out if the airplane fell and basically killed 200 people. So that's the kind of thing that's going on when you have caps and limitations on essentially what is murder.
Well, that's right on. I mean, and it's been going on for a long time. I mean, the Vaccine Safety Act, I have the title of that wrong, passed on November 14th of 1986 by Ronald Reagan. That act has killed and maimed more people than any other supposed law that's ever been passed in the United States, other than Roe versus Wade. And I'm going to actually cover one before Roe versus Wade that's responsible for the Vaccine Safety Act. I mean, they always use a play on words. It certainly has nothing to do with safety. But when you take away the consequences in God's law, there's choice and consequence. So when Satan, through the government, takes away consequences, we're getting what we deserve. I mean, this is the reality. We in a nutshell, we want our own way, but we're lazy. That's our human nature, our human sinful nature, and we are getting what we deserve. I think God is judging America, and I believe COVID was a call to repentance for those who are awake.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this question. You losing. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of research for this documentary that we're working on right now, which Blood Money episode 247 talks a little bit about it, and in that research, I keep running into individuals that have had such great loss in their lives that they are at war with themselves and the world, right? I bring up, somebody like Elon Musk, for example, that decided to take on, quote unquote, the woke mind virus because he feels that his son was brainwashed into becoming trans, right? You look at, individuals that are persecuted by our unjust judicial system. I bring up Donald Trump as an example. He's definitely on a war path. He's definitely somebody that's pissed off because it seems as though the judicial system is not fair, on, I guess, right-wing people versus left-wing. I mean, we've seen a lot of examples of that, We've seen individuals that are so pissed off at what the world's done to them and what these corrupt systems have done that they are out there fighting the fight almost to a point where they don't care if, they'll be assassinated, they'll be, go bankrupt, whatever. I mean, you seem to be one of those individuals that is not mincing words because of the great loss you've had.
Yeah, the great loss I had. I mean, I have not shared this with very many people, but somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, I prayed the prayer that you don't want to pray unless you mean it, which is, God, do whatever you need to do to break me. And he was faithful. I mean, he would have done it anyway. He didn't in my prayer, but broken, used by God. And so I'm not pissed off. What I am is, my eyes have been opened. I realize that I have been programmed. I bought into the American dream lie, the American dream psyop. So I chased the American dream most of my life. Now God is using my sin for good. So in that chase, I had 2.1 kids, 1.7 dogs, no cats, all the things you're supposed to have. And we were going to retire early, and thankfully Grace came along. So she was she put our child ratio up to 3.1, and she started to open up my eyes, but she really needed to die for God to use me, because now my eyes truly are open, and the deprogramming that goes along with your eyes being open, I think it will be the rest of my life, because you really have no idea how much we've been programmed. I know the American dream was a lie, but what did that do? Anyway, on to my specific sin then. I accumulated a fair amount of money through our businesses. And, that's how we're able to fund the lawsuit and do all this crazy stuff. It's not crazy. I mean, it's all God's money. them. So, I am thankful that he was willing to use my sin for good now that my eyes are open and I'm broken. So what I see has been the biggest revelation to me personally is when God showed me. So in July of 22, I learned a term that I had never heard before. And it was while I was studying the Holocaust. And while I was studying the Holocaust, I learned of the term Hegelian dialectic. And I really started studying that. I mean, I couldn't get enough of it, bringing, oh my gosh, this is the ultimate weapon of Satan. And as I was studying it, God showed me, don't use Grace's case to expose evil because it fits into Satan's playbook. So then you think, what? Well, people, when I tell people that, I say, what are you even talking about? Well, Satan has both sides covered, the evil side and the less evil side. And from an esoteric basis, meaning behind the scenes, things we don't see, this is a battle for souls. And in the Hegelian dialectic model, we have problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, all this evil. What are we going to do? Reaction, chaos, fear. Solution, angel of light, false prophet. And so by exposing evil, we end up playing into Satan's hand esoterically, because Satan's goal is to steal souls. Whether he can steal them physically or spiritually, he doesn't care. And ultimately we are being duped right now. We're being set up for a false prophet, a king, because we are lazy. I know we're going to cover that in a little bit, but that kind of gives you the introduction to why I believe we are going to have a king.
Tell me, okay, now I need to hear more about that. Tell me about the whole king thing.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna toggle here then.
Okay.
I'm gonna show you where this comes from. All right. So go ahead.
Okay.
So God warned us of this idea of a king back in 1 Samuel chapter 8. And when you read it, you start reading it, you think, how could these Israelites be so stupid, right? God just parted the Red Sea. He gets them out of Egypt, and then they want a king. Why don't they trust God? He just did all this for them. Well, the reason is because in Genesis chapter 3, we see that Satan just had the first deception when he said, did God really say to Eve? And then the first lie, you can be like God, knowing good and evil. Well, Satan could never promise that, because Satan doesn't know good. He only knows evil. He only knows evil and less evil. All right, so we have the wanting our own way. Well, then combine that with our general nature is lazy. If we can figure out how to do something cheap and lazy, we tend to gravitate toward that. So we have a lazy nature that wants to do its own way. So we're set up for this trap of a king. So I'm going to just read the red highlighted pieces on your screen. I'm just going to turn my head to my other screen because it's larger, and I'm 61 years old. So
Sure, go right ahead. Yep.
I need to have the larger screen. All right, so I'll start in verse 6. But when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord. So remember, these are the Israelites saying to Samuel at that time, give us a king. And the Lord told him, Samuel, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know what the king who will rule them will claim as his rights. Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, this is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons. He will take your daughters. He will take the best of your fields, and you become slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a God to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles. When Samuel heard all that the people said before the Lord answered, listen to them and give them a king. So here we see the nature of people in the scriptures, and we also see God's nature. So our nature. We want a king to take care of us, to fight our battles, so that we can just back to the way things were, Vem. Everybody wants to just get back to the way things were. It says, okay, you can have what you want, but don't come crying to me when it doesn't work out, because you were warned ahead of time. And here's
is the point that we're not like, I mean, we're all at least people on our side are all pushing for justice. We're pushing for freedom. We're pushing for our constitutional rights. Are you saying that people think, we're going to have this individual that's going to come in and it's going to save us, and what we really should be doing is not stopping the fight, because we shouldn't be relying on a human character?
Well, there's relying on the human character is the problem, because as I said earlier, COVID was a call to repentance. So what does that look like? That means acknowledging that we got here by rejecting God. And I'll show you that with the other slide set. We got here by rejecting God. We started to rely on the medical industrial complex to save us, because we have this fear of death. And I'm only talking about the medical industrial complex. There's a lot of different things, lawsuits and the military. We start relying on these things versus relying on God. So consequently, if there's no call to repentance, God can't save us. I mean, his hands are tied. We have to repent as an individual and as a nation. So so you've read Schara, I presume, Vem, have you not?
Have I what?
Read Schara?
No, I haven't. You're talking about Schara? Is that the concept?
Yes.
I mean, I know about it. I don't know if I haven't read the book. I've watched some documentaries on the topic.
So I'll just hit a couple of points, and if you listen to what the two proposed kings are proposing, Harris and Trump, you'll see these type of things. Okay, so the first bullet point on the Schara is zeroes out all credit card, mortgage, and other bank debt due to illegal banking and government activities. All right, so a Jubilee debt forgiveness. All right, so we already know it's been floated. Universal basic income. Abolish the IRS. Employees of the IRS will be transferred to the U.S. Treasury National Sales Tax area, because there's not going to be an income tax anymore. Return constitutional law to all courts and legal matters. Initiates U.S. Treasury bank system in alignment with constitutional law. We gold-backed currency. Nuremberg 2 isn't part of Schara, but I mean, you can see all these promises. So I mean, that's what politicians are used to doing, of course, is making promises. But this list of things, if God was behind it, there's nothing wrong with the list. God doesn't care about the actions; He cares about the heart. But when you
by the way, for the viewers, I just want to point out, for people that don't understand what Schara is, we actually have an episode. I just searched it real quick. Episode 220, Blood Money, where we talk about what Schara is. But are you saying that? I mean, I know Schara is a concept. People don't know if it's like a real thing or if it's some kind of another psyop or whatever. Are you saying that you believe that Schara is a real thing, that there is going to be this collapse in our currency, and then foreign currencies are going to skyrocket, and then all these alternate forms of currency, I guess, are going to skyrocket, whereas the U.S. dollar is going to fall? I mean, is that you believe that theory?
Strangely, I don't believe that theory. All I'm doing is bringing up the idea of how we get trapped. It's so easy to get into the trap because they make these promises, and these promises sound consistent with what godly society, right? That it's a lot fairer society. So a godly society certainly would have laws that are, so it sounds good. Everything on this paper sounds like, wow, yeah, that if somebody proposed all that, I would do it. Personally, what I believe is the Great Reset, all that evil in the Great Reset is by design. Remember, Satan controls both halves in the esoteric dialectic. So if the Great Reset is by design, designed for what? Designed for the Great Awakening. So the Great Awakening becomes the false prophet half of the Great Reset evil half. And I want to just jump forward. Maybe I'll frame this first. What I'm talking about is God told us what Satan's dual nature is in Revelation 13. He said that Satan has an evil half, the Antichrist half, and he has a dragon half, and he has a like a lamb calf. And we always go to safety, security, and comfort. I mean, we did that in COVID, right? We have the supposed pandemic, and then so Hegelian dialectic: problem, pandemic, reaction, fear, solution, the jab. Problem, reaction, solution. So we have evil, virus, less evil, jab, right? I mean, this is Satan's dual nature. You see it esoterically, big picture, Great Reset, Great Awakening, and with events happening. Look at what happened with 9/11. So 9/11, we got, oh my gosh, our country's being attacked. That's the evil, right? Mm-hmm. And then the fear, what's the less evil? The Patriot Act. Well, peel back your act. I mean, that thing it's completely evil, but it's less evil than being attacked than our country being attacked, right? So this is the game. We're participating in this game. And this picture really shows it. There's a level missing that I'll explain here. We're participating. We think like by voting. Oh, we got to vote. We're going to make a difference with voting. Well, that's far down on the totem pole. That just gives us the illusion of choice. But we're voting. First of all, voting has been since the beginning the lesser of two evils. Okay, at least since I've been able to vote, but it's actually been all the way back. So we have this lesser of two evils that the Democrats put up such a bad case. We have to vote Republican, and yet now when I see it as satanic, I see the government is controlled obviously by big pharma, big corporations. Well, who is big pharma and big corporations controlled by? Well, they're controlled by.
Could I really quickly? Sorry to interrupt you. Real quickly, while we're on the 9/11 topic, I just pulled up a couple of Blood Money episodes. Again, I want to make sure the viewers know the background stories to some of the things we're talking about. So 9/11, we have episode 156 of Blood Money and episode 173, and both of them actually talk about how 9/11 was really an inside job, according to. Really two individuals. One is a 40-year attorney named Mick Harrison, who's still going through the courts trying to show evidence which he says 100% that was an inside job, according to his evidence and his own words. And then another episode by an engineer named Joe Olson, episode 156, where again he arrives at the same conclusion, but this time he shows it from an engineering perspective and not a legal perspective. So that's an interesting story that we thought we're being attacked. A lot of people within our country that are experts on topics seem to think that was an inside job. I mean, that's quite a package right there.
Well, I think that's right on. I mean, that was one of the early things that I learned as I started waking up, but then I saw that that's an exoteric dialectic, meaning we can all see it if we're willing to dig. Esoterically, this is it's a chessboard behind the scenes that we don't see. So what happens is Satan in the garden, originally Genesis 3, when Satan said to Eve, you can be like God, knowing good and evil. So this knowledge that you're going to get from eating the fruit, you can be like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. All right, well, that set up the entire occultist dimension, the secret knowledge, the pursuit of secret knowledge, and the occultists controlling the bankers. And those are the levels in between Satan and big pharma and the corporations. And of course, I have Satan's arm having money, because to be able to pull this off, they had to already back in 1933, when our country was bankrupted, they had to get rid of the gold-backed currency. So then the fiat currency became the methodology that they can use to control everything. And it's easily seen when you look at Medicare and Medicaid, which is my other slide set. I don't know if we should bounce back and forth between these two. You got to lead me as to where you want to go.
I say go with the flow with, what feels right,
Sounds good. All right. Well, I'm going to go on that rabbit trail, but I do want to just cover this slide real quick, because
I find just a quick word. I find it really interesting how you're approaching this whole thing, because you're bringing this kind of the unseen element. And one quick thing I want to mention, one of the topics we've been talking about behind the scenes with our partners at the America Happens Network is, it seems to be part of the game is to stop us from basically seeing higher frequencies, higher, like fourth, fifth dimension, these things that we don't necessarily see. They want to squeeze us into this two-dimensional world through through oppression. And it seems as though that's part of the game, is to not let our spirits go to a higher place, but rather really keep us earthbound and controlled. I mean, what would you say to that?
Well, boy, did you hit a nerve for me. Sure. So fifth generation warfare, people have become acclimated to, because that's propaganda. And I know you're aware that the Smith-Mundt Act was passed in 1948, and that made propaganda against U.S. citizens illegal. The United States could use propaganda against everybody else, but not its own citizens. Of course, they violated that law before it was made with the American Dream psyop. But then two specific things. Obviously, Kennedy's murder was a violation of their own law. But then we had 9/11, we had COVID, but COVID was actually legal. So the violation of the Smith-Mundt Act became a non-violation in 2012 when the Smith-Mundt Act was repealed, and then the United States could use propaganda against its own citizens. So when they said safe and effective for a bioweapon, I mean, this has been proven as a bioweapon. The Brook-Jackson lawsuit proves it's a bioweapon. Pfizer and the U.S. government already testified that it was not a vaccine. It's just people don't realize this. But nobody will ever be held to account for that, because that phrase, safe and effective, even though it was a lie, that was legal. And the case, the Brook-Jackson case, just to get you updated on that, on August 9th, there was a motion on May 1st by the federal government to dismiss the case, because if this case gets out, it conflicts with the health policy of the United States. Health is in quotes. And the judge sided with the government on August 9th, and they're going to dismiss the case. So what is the public health policy of the United States? Well, it's vaccinate, 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 because people are too expensive. We've got to reduce the population. And I'm going to hit one slide on this. I'm going to jump to the other slides and show you how they did this through sixth generation warfare. So we just got done talking about fifth generation warfare. Well, sixth generation warfare we already talked about briefly, which is the law of entropy. And this is the satanic realm where he's implementing these long-term 6,000 year agendas through the law of entropy. Of course, Satan is still under God, and I'll just show you that. I'm going to jump to an example then real quick. So the rules of engagement in this esoteric battle for souls, God wrote it in Genesis 18:17. He said, "Then the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" What he's talking about here, Bam, is before he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, he said from Abraham what I am about to do. So God's character is revealed here. He is not going to keep us in the dark. He wants to make sure that if we're paying attention, that we know what's going on, is under God. So Satan has to do the same thing, but it's up to us now to pay attention to what's going on. Satan is a legalist. So like I said, with COVID, nobody will be held to account, because all crossed, all the I's dotted. But if we would have been paying, I'm talking about me now. If I would have been paying attention, my daughter Grace would not have lost her life, because I would have seen that it was a psyop before it ever started. And I did, it's why one of the reasons I've become so outspoken is I don't want this to happen to anybody else. So now what am I talking? What's an example? Well, I told you I see Trump in the false prophet side of things, and here's what he wrote relative to nations. The pandemic no longer controls our life. This is only 4 months ago. The vaccines that saved us from COVID are now being used to help beat cancer, turning setback into comeback. You're welcome, Joe. 9-month approval time versus 12 years that it would have taken you. All right, this is insanity. But this is, the presumed king, which I believe is Trump. This is what he believes relative to what he did. I mean, he killed millions of people. He's directly responsible for Grace's death. How? Because the medical murders, the purpose of these people being killed in hospitals was to ratchet up the fear porn, because the Brook-Jackson case was already out. They had to get the fear porn up so that people would take this jab. So this isn't a joke. All right, so then I want to flip back to the other slides And I want to give you this history. So you can see this one is titled Standards of Care, Standards of Death. Both of these slide sets, by the way, Vem, Standards of Care and Standards of Death. And then the other we have titled right here, Why Do We Want a King? I have recorded these on my Rumble channel, Deprogramming with Grace's Dad. So the full slide deck on both of these, you can see, you can get my worthless commentary on both slides. But I want to go into the standards of care and give you kind of a longer term history of this law of entropy. The Hippocratic Oath, that started in 400 BC. So Hippocrates lived in 400 BC. The Hippocratic Oath is then. I'm going to come back to that here in a minute. Whole virology vaccine psyop started in the 1880s. Jacobson versus Massachusetts. This is one most people would not have heard of. This is a big deal. This was a Supreme Court case. A pastor with the last name of Jacobson didn't take the smallpox vaccine. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court decided in favor of the Massachusetts. And this was the stake in the ground that they needed to pull off COVID. So this stake in the ground, I'm going to read this and you'll recognize what the stake in the ground is as soon as the court held in every well-ordered society charged with the duty of conserving the safety of its members, the rights of the individual in respect to his liberty may at times, under the pressure of great dangers, expected to such restraint to be enforced by reasonable regulations as the safety of the general public made. So this was the collectivism stake in the ground. This is why the Brooke Jackson case just on August 9th, because the good of the health of the population. So for the good of the population, we've got to let the federal health policy go. Well, the federal health policy is satanic. It is, but this Supreme Court case gave the teeth necessary to pull off COVID. And I'm going to zoom out here just for a minute, because if you think about how our government was formed, we have, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and then the judicial branch. Well, those branches are supposed to operate independently. So when the Supreme Court made this decision, that we got in another trap. So trap of legal precedent. And this was all by design too. I'm not talking about this today because I'm in the medical lane, but legal lane precedent, that should have never been the equivalent of law. The idea of precedent becoming law. Now the judicial is ruling from the bench. So this became the equivalent of law. And this law is still ruling us today. This principle of collectivism is literally how COVID was pulled off. All right, then you go to 1910, the Flexner Report. The Carnegie family hired Abraham Flexner to write a report that said modern day medicine, allopathic medicine, is the thing. We got to trust the science. All these other flaky things, chiropractic, osteopathic, naturopathic, they're no good. We're going to put all of our efforts into trusting the science. And this is where the whole trust the science, safe and effective, that's where it all came from. Well, then we have a monster implementation to hasten death, Medicare and Medicaid. July 30th, 1965, President Johnson passed Medicare and Medicaid. And like with all laws, it's with all this fanfare, right? We're going to help the elderly and the disabled. Well, what they decided to do, which I think it was by design, of course, they decided to help the elderly and disabled to an early grave, and they did that through standards of care. But before I get into standards of care, because this is really a neat thing to ask, because most people don't understand where I'm going here. So Vem, I'm going to ask you the question: should we hold doctors to their oath? Yes or no?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, totally.
Yep. Virtually every single person I've asked says that. And so I'm going to, I'm not a trickery type guy. I'm a jokester, but this is a trick question. Why? Because I studied the Hippocratic Oath. This is what I have on the screen right now is the first two paragraphs out of the Hippocratic Oath and the last paragraph. I'm just going to read the first paragraph so you get a grip as no, we don't want to hold them to their oath. I swear by Apollo the physician and Asclepius the surgeon, likewise Hygeia and Panacea, and call all the goddesses to witness that I will observe and keep this underwritten oath to the utmost in judgment. So we have an oath that is to satanic gods. This is how they set it up. This has been up since 400 BC for this time. I mean, that's a mind blower. I first used this as a test question. I did a live presentation in Maine 3 weeks ago, and I developed this slide deck presentation. And yeah, virtually everybody in the audience said the same thing, is like, whoa, I didn't know that. I did a 2-part series on the Hippocratic Oath on my deprogramming channel. All right, I want to just hit the Medicare and Medicaid, and then I know you probably want to ask some more questions after this. So I say that Medicare and Medicaid is hastening death. Well, I'm going to drill this down in enough detail that people get it here. So first, just to set the stage, there's 2.8 million deaths annually in the United States per year. 1.7 million of those deaths are directly caused by the medical industrial establishment. That's 142,000 new medical murders every single month. It's like, what? And that include the preborn at 75,000 a month. All right, so then what do I mean by the standards of care are designed to hasten death? Well, take cancer, for example. And by the way, Vem, I'm not even talking about the reality that heart disease and cancer are caused by foods, the environment, all the things that they've designed to give us heart disease and cancer. I'm just talking about once we get these things, okay? So once you get, what is the programming? The programming for the person who gets cancer is first, oh, that's the kiss of death, right? And then the next thing, okay, well, yeah, my doctor's recommended chemo. Yeah, I don't like losing my hair. I know it's not going to be good, but yeah, I'm going to. So then the only question on their mind after they come to grips with it is, does my insurance pay for it? The question is yes, because your insurance is in bed directly with Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They write the standards of care for the entire country. The doctor, all right, so what's his programming? His programming is the same as the individual, although he also can add radiation and cutting. Those are the only 3 methods that he can use to get paid. He doesn't get paid. He can't keep his license if he recommends a real cure for cancer. He can only recommend things that will kill you. And here's the statistics with cancer, Vem. On the left-hand side are a number of cancers and then the 5-year survival rate over on the right-hand side. And you can see the average survival rate across the board for chemo treatments is only 2.1%, 7.9% kill rate. I mean, wow. So you could, this is how bad it is. I'm saying they are all in on it. So they tell us, for example, and this is where it comes back to the fiat currency, and you can see the psyop in it, because what they're doing is telling us they're always doing it, right? Social Security is going to go bankrupt. Medicare and Medicaid is going to go bankrupt. It'll go bankrupt. That's not the goal. They use that to, so no, don't let it bankrupt. We paid into that, right? The best thing it could do is to go bankrupt, but it'll go bankrupt because it's part of the design. They want us chasing this thing. We got Social Security we paid in for our whole life. We got free medical once we're 65. I deserve that. That's part of the psyop. So this stuff will never go away. They claim that the reason that it's a problem is because it's cost too much. Well, we have a fiat currency. We write checks, unlimited checks to Ukraine and Israel. I mean, so just wrap your head around that. We've never had a balanced budget in the last couple of decades. Never will have a balanced budget because our country's been sold. We have an unlimited line of credit with the bankers because us and our property are the collateral for the debt. It's like, what? Yeah. So anyway, I know I'm going off on a rabbit trail there, but I just wanted to connect the dots with why I say bluntly, the medical industrial establishment is responsible for 142,000 medical every single month. And I want to connect the dots with this 100%, Vem. When I was diagnosed with heart disease 6.5 years ago, and God uses these events for a time when he needs them. Diagnosed, they wanted me to go on a statin. They said your cholesterol's too high. I started researching, never went on the statin. And I found out, oh my gosh, the cholesterol lie. That's a lie. We need to lower our cholesterol. High cholesterol is good for you. High cholesterol prevents Alzheimer's. And they wanted me to go on a statin. If you go on the statin, it increases your chance of a heart attack. What's the reason? They want you to do a stent. The stent, they want you to die first, but if you make it, they want to do a stent, which is a $50,000 procedure for 20 minutes. Okay, so then what's my message? Well, after I decided to not do the statin, a decent nurse, I really am proud of her. She walked me out and said, "Scott, you have to go on the statin." I said, "What are you talking about? I don't have to do anything." And she said, "You don't understand." She said, "Our Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement rates are based on what percentage of our patient population goes on the standard of care. And the standard of care for heart disease is the statin." I said, "I'm not on Medicare and Medicaid." She said, "You didn't hear me." She said, "I'm talking about our entire patient population. And if there's enough people like you who reject the standard of care, we have to fire you as a patient." It's like, what? So CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, controls the entire country. That's illegal, by the way. Them, it was legalized through the Chevron decision, which was just repealed a little less than 2 months ago. Yes, but all the damage has already been done. And just so you have a reference point to prove what I'm saying, I'm going to play this 30-second clip here. It should be able to play. Let's just try it.
How many nursing homes are under federal care, or does the federal government own? Are there any? I know they're state and they're private, but does the federal government have direct control? Are there any federal nursing home facilities?
Well, the VA has some nursing homes, but in terms of my agency, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, we set the federal guidelines of safety and quality, and then we work with the states to inspect these nursing homes to make sure they're adhering to those guidelines. But ultimately, states license these facilities. What the federal government can do if a nursing home isn't compliant is we can withhold their reimbursement from Medicare or Medicaid.
Okay, so that was Seema Verma. She's the head of CMS. So she's explaining how the government nursing homes. All right, so the government controls not just nursing homes; they control hospital systems, control the entire medical industrial complex. They control end of life care, everything. And so, if the organizations don't comply, they withhold reimbursement. So
on that topic, sorry, I just wanted to quickly point out one other thing, because you were talking about the monetary instruments, and this was like a few minutes back before you played that clip of how they have infinite money. And again, I apologize, but I want to reference an episode, Blood Money episode 243. We have a gentleman by the name of Brandon Joe Williamson. By the way, we've done a lot of episodes on this topic very early on, in terms of really talking about how they invent money out of nowhere, and this whole lie about Social Security that, oh my God, we put in all this money in there and you don't want to lose it. I mean, that is just a fear mechanism when, if they want to send $100 billion to Ukraine, they just make it, and we just, it's part of the inherent problem of why we see so much evil, because if this was all based on a gold and silver currency, I think we'd be less likely to allow all sorts of evil to happen due to this fictitious thing that we call our Federal Reserve notes.
Well, I of course agree. There's been a convergence of evil. It's like it's coming from all sides. I've become an expert in this medical industrial complex lane, but I've had to, as I'm learning, you've got to fit this all together. And fortunately, God gave me that ability. I put together this little. I have become better at PowerPoint slides since I first met you. So I put together what AI looked in this model, if you could see it. So what do you think of that?
Sorry, I had so this is, if you
this is what
looks like.
Yeah,
wow.
I made this. I've become better at these slides now. So I made up this meme as to what AI would look like if you could see it. So this is happening. This is not a joke.
Wow.
I mean, and both of us just experienced this with the hospital situation we talked about. I want to hit a couple more things while I'm on this slide deck. I've been reading this book. I have the copy right here. Descent in Medicine, and I'm going back to the cancer situation. These guys, it's interesting. This was 1984. These are 9 MDs, and they already saw that standards of care were killing people. They couldn't believe it, so they started speaking out to their profession in hopes that they could stop this. And this is what they wrote about cancer in 1984. They wrote the entire field of orthodox oncology will disappear as chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation for cancer are revealed as fundamentally irrational and scientifically insupportable. Then in conclusion, they wrote, a patient stands a better chance of recovery if he is never diagnosed. So why weren't they successful? And this is a spiritual war. This is not a war that's going to be won by, and that's, my message about not falling trap for a king is a king can, if they are not empowered by God, there's only so much they can do. And this medical industrial complex is so embedded in the training of their members that this is the type of the result. This is a Facebook post from a labor and delivery nurse. Our daughter Jessica found this 3 weeks ago. This will shake you to the core. She writes, as a labor and delivery nurse, it was up to me to inject the newborn. Even back then, over 30 years ago, we had patients that would refuse. I know that it is their right as parents to refuse, but as not only a nurse, but also as a mother, I just could not send a baby home defenseless. I know what was not right, but I would inform the parents I was taking the baby to weigh him or her on a more precise scale and then take them to the inject them. Just had to do it. No baby was going to bleed out on my watch in spite of the parents' stupidness.
Wow. And then we wonder why government feels so at liberty to essentially take the parental rights away. But, when you have people thinking this way.
This is why I say the rule of law is dead. And it's not just dead with that lady, it's dead on purpose. The state licensing board. So why do the doctors do this? Well, obviously the state licensing boards protect their license, all the standard of care. We saw this with COVID, right? The doctors recommending things outside of remdesivir and ventilators, they lost their license. The state statutes that I mentioned earlier, why would state statutes have a limitation to liability? Why do state statutes require the doctors to have medical malpractice insurance? Why do the state statutes, the big money in lawsuits is loss of companionship? Well, guess what? Grace was 9 years old. The state statute says because she's an adult, there's no loss of companionship, period, by statute.
Wow.
Obviously, their incentives, the reimbursement rates, their entire pay plan is based on the standard of care model. Well, then, I've already mentioned their training. AI is in on it. Most of them follow a system called Epic, which, they put in the parameters, fits a treatment protocol that checks all the boxes so they can maximize the revenue. Well, the clip that I have right in the middle, you mentioned before, this is murder, should be criminal. Well, we had a separate attorney that wrote to the DA with our request to open up a criminal investigation into what happened with Grace. And the DA's office, I took this excerpt out, so that even the local DA is on it. She wrote, the doctor is not required to administer treatment she or he believes is not medically effective. This includes authorizing a DNR. DNR is doing. The parties clearly had a dispute about how Dr. Shokar should treat Grace. Dr. Shokar did not abide by the wishes of the family. However, there's no law in Wisconsin that requires him to do so.
So crazy. Could I give an quick example, with my hospital visit? So our friend, 5 weeks, like I said earlier on in the episode, 5 weeks, this man has been in the hospital. They don't even know what the hell's wrong with him. After doing all these tests, right? We suspect that he's been poisoned, because if you're not able to find what's wrong with the guy, there is untraceable poisonings that happen. The two things that we suspected was, poison either through the mouth or through injection or radiation poisoning. In both cases, the evidence shows that there are ways that goes undetected unless you do very specialized tests, right? So we say, okay, in the odd chance that he was poisoned, right? And I say odd in a sarcastic way. Why don't we give him, and this was, I texted a bunch of frontline doctors, or a group of frontline doctors that I've become friendly with because of this podcast. And I told them the symptoms that our friend was going through, right? And so they say that, one of the things that you should give him is some good old iodine that is in, sea salt, iodine that is plentiful in our environment, and really, from what I know, doesn't have many side effects, right? You should have seen the way this dog, huh?
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
right?
You should have seen the way this doctor reacted. Like, it was almost like I was telling him to put morphine in the guy, where he's like, oh my God, I can't give iodine without knowing if it's going to be helpful or knowing it's poisoning. I mean, iodine. Yet they're injecting him, giving all these pharmaceuticals. I mean, like I said, 14 hours, the man is lying naked there, out of his mind, because he's on so much morphine. He doesn't even know what planet he's on. That's okay, right? But like giving him a little bit of iodine from the sea seems to be something that this doctor almost lost his mind over.
Yeah. I mean, just a much more simple example. When Grace was in the hospital, the second day, you get in the hospital, you get dehydrated, all the different things. And I just asked the nurse, would Pedialyte be good for Grace? Oh yeah, that would be great. I said, well, do you have some? No, we don't have that here. So, I had my son-in-law go get a simple thing like Pedialyte. But I mean, it is the.
Yeah. It's frustrating, man. I mean, I'm looking at this dude's bills. I'm like literally sitting there just being like, let me, keep him company, because he doesn't seem to have, didn't have people with him that day. And I asked for a little table so I could put my laptop on, like those tables that they have in every hospital room. And they can't even find me that little thing. I mean, they're charging this man over $1,000 a day. They give Pepto-Bismol in front of me. And I know they're billing that, $1 Pepto-Bismol little shot, probably at $50 and stuff. I mean, the whole thing is a mess. It's a big money-making scheme from I think what we've come to realize in the last few years.
I wish it was only money. If it was only money, it could be fixed. But it's not just money. It's actually all been by design. And the program, this is where it gets. I'm not depressed, but it gets to the point where it is depressing that you keep speaking out. And when do people change? Generally people don't change until something impacts them. And I'm going to keep speaking out, but that's just the reality of when you start doing this full time. It's like, what? Why?
Yeah. The apathy of people that really don't care until it hits home, and then they care, but they can't. Like, we would prevent so much of this stuff if people listened to our stories, heard our stories, and we did this as a mass public, really.
If we could get on, could do an announcement from the Oval Office that carried on all the networks. Yeah, we could wake up everybody and, fast hurry. I don't know how much more time you have, but I at least want to, I know we budget an hour in these programs. I can go on for 10 hours if you want, but the reality is people don't listen much further beyond an hour. And, our website, ouramazinggrace.net, that's where all this stuff is posted. You can see a link to my deprogramming channel. Remember, I think when I first met you, we had our released, Breaking the Oath.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like eons ago, but it was May of 23. It was only a year and 3 months ago. I do want to share this. This was outside the courthouse, Bem, on July 14th of 23. This is after the first hearing where the judge dismissed all the motions to dismiss, which was great. Wow. The attorney's monkey suit. Our daughter Jessica is on the right, my wife Cindy on the left, and we look at our fight is under Genesis 50:20, which says what you meant for evil, God meant for good. The saving of many lives is happening today. So Grace's death has not been in vain. We see our message as a physical saving of lives, waking people up to the medical industrial establishment, but the spiritual saving, seeing that this is a spiritual battle. And that's what is going on here. I mean, we have a satanic battle for souls right now. And, we're not going to, as I have this quick slide, now legislate our way out of this. Are we going to get a king to take our way out of this? Are we going to use the court system to get this? And you can see I have a picture of a white pill there because I codified this term. I guess you could say I was, familiar with the matrix, the blue pill, the red pill. And then I saw somebody that wrote something about the black pill where you just say, okay, I just don't want to hear any more of it. Well, the white pill is it's meant to be a type of a picture of the God of the universe and his son and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So the only way out of this is not any of these things that are traps, because we cannot contract morality. We can't vote in morality, and the legal system is not going to provide morality. We have to have a heart change, and that's what God's son is all about. And that's the white pill.
Wow. Amazing, Scott. Scott, it's always a great pleasure to have you on our show. And, I'd love to have you back to continue this conversation. Is there anything you wanted to say in closing before we wrap this episode up?
Well, I've really said everything that I wanted to say. My frustration point right now is people want a king. And, I see Christians are the ones that are being duped. And that's why I presented the Why Do We Want a King as a much longer podcast on my channel. But, I don't know the heart of anybody. I don't know the heart of Harris. I don't know the heart of Trump. They give us clues. And that's why I really don't want people to fall trap to the lesser of two evils. So if you have Satan controlling both sides, evil versus less evil is still evil. And I'll share what a pastor, when I was processing this whole Hegelian dialectic, a pastor by the name of Matt Truella, he's become a friend. And I normally get hives around pastors. I mean, I think that they're mainly in on it, but there's a few who are decent. And Matt Truella is one of them. And during a sermon before the last Senate election, so this is November of 2022, in Wisconsin. So you can tell I'm from Wisconsin, can't you, Vem? Because I don't
get out of here. Are you serious?
So
anyway, I've been craving like cheddar cheese the whole time, and I didn't know why. It's subconscious, I guess,
So I love that kind of humor. Anyway, so Matt Truella, during a sermon the week before the election, he said, we have two candidates in Wisconsin running for Senate, Mandela Barnes and Ron Johnson. And most everybody in the country would be, oh yeah, Ron Johnson, he's great, right? But Matt brought up a great point, and he was talking. His lane is abortion, and he said Mandela Barnes believes in full-term abortion, and Ron Johnson believes in abortion with these parameters. So they're both murderers. It's just a matter of degree. And that sermon really framed the evil versus less evil dialectic that Satan uses to get us in the trap. So then we end up participating in evil. And, the only way out of this is, as I said earlier, is repentance. And I think that God is judging us, and he just wants us to look to him as the answer. And
wow.
That's our way out of this.
Wow. Scott, thank you so much for coming on this Blood Money episode. Really, I mean, it's tough. It's tough. We're looking at you look at somebody like a Harris, and her intentions are so purely sinister. And I tend to think that she doesn't even know what the hell she's doing. I don't know if there's much difference between her and Biden. I think she's just a groomed individual that doesn't, it's almost like we're looking, we've done some content on this. I've been on a lot of different shows. We're looking at basically a Justin Trudeau becoming our president over here. That's what she is. She's a Justin Trudeau. She was groomed in Montreal University. She's very much a socialist communist. She would be essentially our first Canadian president, and that would be absolute disaster, right? But then I look at Donald Trump, and while I agree with a lot of things, and the thing that most excites me about Donald Trump is the fact that he's dealt with this very corrupt judicial system. So I am hopeful that he will take some kind of action, although I am doubtful he will take all the action that's necessary. And that's where I think it's almost like I am going to vote for Donald Trump 100% without a shadow of a doubt. He's by far the superior candidate. Although I am very concerned with his defense of the jab, very concerned with that, and I'm concerned about some of the stuff you're saying. And it's still, I still am going to vote for Donald Trump, but I certainly share some of your concerns that he's been quiet on some of these topics, and certainly the spiritual battle is glaring, you know?
If I can, I'm going to read a couple of slides from my now that you brought that up. And I, where I stand on it is I'm not voting in this election. I'm not criticizing somebody that is. That's not my point. I don't, everybody's at a different place. But what I did in the Why Do We Want a King series, I put together these two slides, and it became so important. It's a lot of text, but I put it together because it shows a view, a macro view in two slides. So I'm just going to read these two slides, Vem. If I can screen share one more time. Do I have to do that on my end?
Yes. If you could drop it in there and I'll turn it on.
Sounds good. All right. So these will be up on the screen so you can screenshot them if you want, but I'm going to read these. So in closing this topic on our desire for a king and zooming out a bit, consider these facts. President Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102 on April 5th, 1933, forbidding the hoarding of gold bullion and gold certificates. Individuals, partnerships, associations, and corporations were required to deliver their gold to Federal Reserve banks or member banks by May 1 of 1933. Then the United States declared bankruptcy through House Joint Resolution 192, which was passed on June 5th, 1933. How many of you knew the United States was sold to the occultist bankers and we are collateral for the debt? We've been lied to. Roosevelt was a Freemason. He once stated, in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. Satan is bound by the principle of Genesis 18:17 that you and I talked about that earlier. He cannot hide what he is up to. We can see these things if we allow God to open our eyes. Free healthcare has become a reality of the American dream on July 30th, 1965, as a lie sold by President Johnson, having a population believed the government was taking care of the elderly and disabled. Through standards of care enforced by Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, this system is used to hasten the deaths of the people we were told would be helped. These non-contributing members of society cost too much. Again, we were lied to. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon ability to trade paper money for gold, fortifying the goal of a fiat currency to control all the world players. This was a major league deception. On November 14, 1986, President Reagan signed into law the ultimate government support for the medical industrial complex and maiming more people than any other prior action other than Roe versus Wade. What law? The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act gave a free pass to kill anyone submitted to the government system of health. Today, the public fool system requires 80 jabs to participate in their free indoctrination program so we can selfishly chase the American dream deception. We've been lied to. The U.S. is a bankrupt corporation. When we claim to be citizens of the U.S., we give up all rights to self and property. We submit to our government as the entity responsible for our health. Our pursuit of the American dream has resulted in slavery. God warned us what our desire for a king would lead to. And I read that out of 1 Samuel chapter 8 earlier. In Satan's world, level occultists are trained in the Hegelian dialectic method of control. Our government officials are pawns in this battle for us. Given these realities, why is it so hard to believe that Russiagate, the election, the lawsuits, and the assassination attempt were all part of the deception to convince the population to rebel against the deep state and support a king who will fix everything? Because these things happen by design does not make Trump good. He is the less evil choice for king. Zooming out further, I'm 100% convinced that the plan to take down the satanic cabal was written by the satanic cabal as Satan's last chance to close the control grid. And that's behind my Matrix Revealed series. That's on Rumble. It's a 4-part series. Once you are awake to every system of the world, you have a choice. The next king will further the satanic agenda by design. Although we are in the world, we are called to be out of the world. So you asked me, do I have one more thing to say? There you have it. I have a lot more to say.
Wow.
You just kind of got me going with it.
Yeah. It's powerful. It's powerful. And, I don't know, Scott. I don't know where we go from here, man. It's, I think a lot of this is like the desperation of people who've been so oppressed that they're looking for a savior, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of us would probably accept a king. I hear all the time like, oh, Putin would be such a better president because he'd actually put America first, just like he puts Russia first. And that's essentially a king. That's a dictator, and how bad have things gotten that I think a lot of us are open to that. I mean, I think it's a cascade of corruption that has happened.
Wow.
Pretty much as long as we've been alive, that's made a lot of people desire, a benevolent dictator versus a corrupt president almost,
Wow. Yeah, you said a mouthful there, Val.
Yeah.
You are such a good host. I always appreciate when you have me on because we can go back and forth and there's no judgment. It's really good.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, I hear the concerns, yeah. But Scott, this is it's always great having you on the show, and thank you so much for putting up the fight that you've been putting up. I mean, I could definitely relate to once you have your most precious love taken from you, it's like, what is there to do but fight,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she was definitely my best buddy, Val, and
Yeah.
I miss her more than anybody can ever imagine. So,
Wow.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on the Blood Money podcast. For the viewers out there, make sure you check out, recent development. We're now on Smart TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV. Make sure you check out our channel there. We're uploading our latest episodes as well as on Rumble, and we stream live on X. Make sure you check out some of our latest content, like that Mike Little piece, episode 247, for which we are actually building a documentary right now that we're going to start releasing in parts. Again, thank you so much for joining us for this Blood Money episode, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.